Hey guys, so if you're watching this, that means you're probably scrambling to turn in that term paper that was basically due yesterday. Now, the good news is you're already doing something right watching this video because you're trying to write a good term paper, right? And that is not an easy task. I know, I've read a bunch of term papers, I've assigned a bunch of term papers. Some of them were great, some of them not so great. But that is because writing a term paper is not an easy task. Like, we assign term papers to you, but we usually don't give you enough information about what does it take to write a great term paper. So that's what we are talking about today. I'm giving you some of my tips on what I think are the most important points that you have to hit in order to actually end up with a good and even great term paper. So first step towards writing a good term paper is realizing it's not about quantity, right? So you will not impress me or your professor by turning in a term paper that's like 50 pages long that we need to read through the whole night, especially if it's not a very good term paper, right? So don't shoot for quantity, shoot for quality. So how do we get quality? That's a tough one. And it comes down to understanding, why do we assign term papers to you? There are two main reasons why we do that. So one point of writing a term paper is to go deeper in a subject, to introduce yourself with the subject at a deeper level. And the second reason why we give term papers is to practice writing, for you guys to learn how to write. So those are the two goals: to learn something and to learn how to write. Okay, so now that you realize that, then the second important point you need to realize: you should not write term papers for me, for your professor. You should write a term paper for your fellow classmates, for your colleagues, for other students, so that it's useful for them. Right? Because us professors, we know those things. I mean, I love it when I read a good term paper and learn something from it, but that's not why we give you guys to write term papers. So always keep in mind that you're writing it for your fellow classmates. So if they get your term paper and read it, they go, oh, okay, I learned something new. Okay, so it's for them. It's not for us. Okay. So those are the main points. Now let's start at the beginning. How do you start? You get a topic, so how do you proceed? Well, first thing is to explore the topic, right? Investigate, do research, read a bunch of papers, watch YouTube videos, read online articles. So explore, research the subject. Now, don't immediately start writing as you're researching the subject. That will make a bad term paper. That will turn into a Frankenstein or something like that. So you're just researching the subject and taking notes. Okay. When you're done that, then you try to think about what you've learned, and then you need to define the main point of that topic, the main message, right? And try to do that by summarizing the entire topic, the main points, in 2 or 3 sentences. Okay, that's the toughest part, I think. That means that you researched the topic well, that you processed it, digested it, and so now you can get 2 or 3 main morals of the story, right? And those 2 or 3 main points will actually be the essence of your conclusion part, right? And those will be the pillars around which you will be constructing your term papers. So that's the toughest part, identifying those 2 or 3 key points. Now that you've done that, then you can proceed to constructing, the framework, basically, of your term paper. And you do that by taking those 3 key points you identified and expanding each of them. Meaning, point 1, okay, what do I need to introduce? What part do I need to introduce so that whoever is reading this will understand point one. Then expand point two. What do I need to introduce so that whoever is reading this will understand point two. So that's how you construct the main framework of your paper. And those expansions of those 3 points will create essentially the main part of the body, of the middle part of your term paper. So for example, as I'm an astrophysicist, for instance, if I were to write a term paper on life beyond Earth, what would be my 3 main key points? Well, it would be that first we're assuming that we're looking for a life that's similar to life that exists on Earth. Then the next point would be that we are actively searching for worlds around other stars where we think life can happen, and then we need to figure out if we find those worlds, how to detect the life. So those are the 3 main points. So which would be the essence of my conclusions. So how do I expand on them? How do I create this framework, wireframe that will make the body the middle part of my term paper? Well, I said, okay, so we are looking for a life that is similar to life on Earth. So then I need to define what do we mean by life on Earth. That we are basically assuming that we require water and certain, carbon-based organisms and so on. So I need to introduce all that. That means I need to introduce the topic of habitable zones, around stars, places, distance from a star where we could have liquid water. Then I need to, when talking about finding worlds around other stars, I need to define all the methods we use to find other planets, what sort of planets they are, and how, and eventually, how do we detect atmospheres, what are the signatures of lives in the atmospheres, and so on. So those are the few, main things I need to hit on my term paper so that basically it would make a coherent story. And then once you define that wireframe, you just build around it and write sentences around it and expand it, and that turns into your actually a term paper. So don't just sit and start writing. I mean, you're not building a house by just going to store buy some bricks and woods and whatever and start building. No, you need a project. You need a sketch of how the house will be constructed, and then you start building. And that is what you do with the term paper. You need to identify key points, key pillars, expand on them, and then build your term paper around that. Eventually, you will need to find an introduction. Now, that's mostly a difficult part for most of students in my experience, but it's not so difficult once you realize why are you writing about that topic. Okay, if the topic was assigned to you, then you cannot just write, oh, it was assigned to me, but then you need to investigate, research, why is this topic important? I mean, why should anyone read this term paper? Why should anyone care about this? That is what the introduction is about, like the motivation. Why should anyone care about this topic? If you're the one who picked the topic, then just write that. Why did you pick that topic? What do you find interesting around the topic? And in terms of that motivation, put that motivation in the context of a course for which you're writing this term paper, right? So if we're talking about life, if the course is some astronomy course, talk about finding life elsewhere in the universe. If we talk about life and you're writing this for a biology course, write it in terms of, life on Earth and how did it came to be and all the extreme conditions where we find life, where we find life. So place your topic in a context of the course for which you're writing this term paper. Okay, so that's your introduction. And conclusion, we said already, conclusion is basically just reiterating on those 3 main points that you define are the takeaway points for this term paper. Eventually, every good term paper has to have literature basically at the end. And for that, I mean, I know you guys watch a lot of YouTube, read Wikipedia, Google, and so on. But when you're writing a term paper, you really need to put in some credible references, like to show that you find credible sources, to show that you've read that info from a book or from a science article or something like that. So it's perfectly fine to go to Wikipedia and to familiarize yourself with the topic. But don't just quote Wikipedia or I read this in Wikipedia. No, scroll down to the bottom page of the Wikipedia and you'll find references there for everything that's been written in the Wikipedia text and quote those. So I too use Wikipedia, and that's my starting point often. But then I was like, okay, there's this piece of info in Wikipedia, and they quote this reference, scroll down, look at that reference. So go to the source. Don't just quote Wikipedia. Find credible sources. That is very important. Like just by scanning through your literature, we immediately form an opinion how good a term paper is, because we immediately can see, okay, did you cover this topic well, broadly enough from the credible sources or not? So having credible references listed at the literature is very important. And last but not least, and I know you heard this, but don't plagiarize, right? I know it's not, of course, it's not ethical, but you'll get caught probably. And that's because basically we professors read a lot of term papers and we get very good at spotting plagiarized papers, because basically if you write something in your own style and then copy entire parts from other papers, we basically notice the change in style and we can easily spot if the paper is plagiarized, and you'll get into trouble. So don't do that. Anyway, so that's basically it. So let's repeat those do's and don'ts. So what's a don't? Don't is don't aim for quantity. Don't is don't write for me. Don't write for a professor. Also, don't write immediately. Explore the subject and first define key points and for wireframe, and then start writing, and don't plagiarize. The do's are basically uh, uh, make a concept, identify key points, expand on them, and write around that. Write for your fellow classmates so that it's useful for them, and write in your own words. So that's about it, and good luck with that term paper.